Medya Haber ekranlarında yeni bir Avrupa gündemi programında yeniden birlikteyiz. Bugün Amerika'dan gazeteci Debbie Bookchin bizlerle. Öncelikle Debbie Bookchin'e merhaba diyelim. Hello dear Debbie, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for accepting that interview. Let's start with the Abdullah Öcalan situation. There are now concerns about Mr. Öcalan's health, and he has been under isolation last 23 years now. Can you comment on this treatment?
The treatment of Abdullah Öcalan is completely inhumane by any standard of human rights law and is unacceptable. The United Nations and many other legal bodies have determined that holding someone in isolation is a form of torture. Any claim to respect basic civil rights would demand that Turkey allow Mr. Öcalan contact with his lawyers and family and that he receive proper health care. But this behavior by the Turkish state, while outrageous, isn't surprising. It is really, in fact, just one more illustration of the state terrorism that the Erdogan government uses against the Kurdish people.
The importance of the freedom of Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan and delisting the PKK from terrorist organizations list.
Put in the simplest terms, Turkey uses the terrorist designation of the PKK to justify an all-out war against the Kurdish people everywhere. This includes the kidnapping, murder, torture of people, the bombing of Kurdish villages and refugee camps. It's really the most egregious example of state-sponsored violence, and it's a grotesque hypocrisy that Western nations, which claim to believe in human rights, remain silent. Mr. Öcalan has now served 23 years under the most inhumane conditions. It's essential that he be released from prison, both on humanitarian grounds and because he's the voice and spirit of the Kurdish people, and he is essential to peace negotiations. There are many ways in which the United States, EU, and European Court of Human Rights could put moral and economic pressure, in the case of the states, on Turkey to reopen peace negotiations with the Kurdish people and their representatives. One of the best ways to do this would be to delist the PKK, which would take away Turkey's justification for its atrocities towards the Kurdish people, not just its own population, but the Kurdish people in Rojava and Bashur as well. And the other critically important step would be, of course, to free Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan, who, like Nelson Mandela before him, must be freed in order for peace negotiations to proceed.
Turkey is getting more and more repressive in its treatments of the Kurds. This must have a bearing on how Western allies view the Kurds. What can we do to shame our governments into acting in favor of the values of human rights, of justice that they claim to uphold?
Our governments have shown an extraordinary callousness in regard to the plight of the Kurdish people. One of the things that's particularly upsetting is that there's so little appreciation of the enormous sacrifice the Kurdish people have made in destroying Daesh. Just stop and think about that for a moment. Daesh controlled an area as large as Great Britain just a few years ago, and now, while still a danger, Daesh has been profoundly debilitated. This is due to the sacrifice of 13,000 Kurdish lives. The Kurdish people literally saved us from ISIS. In a world where people were justly honored for the sacrifices they've made, the Kurdish people would win the Nobel Peace Prize. The U.S. military recognizes how profound that sacrifice has been, yet our governments refuse to do so. So on the most immediate level, we have to remind our governments that if they really want to see stability and peace in the region, it would be in their best interests to delist the PKK, which would remove Turkey's excuse for its terrorist actions against the Kurdish people and press Turkey back into peace negotiations. It's important to remember that in 1995, the PKK renounced armed civil conflict except for self-defense, and that Turkey has been the perpetrator of violence, both indirectly and also through jihadi militias and also directly through its bombing campaigns. So we really must raise our voices and demand the delisting of the PKK and the reopening of the peace process. We have to stop sending military aid to Turkey and demand that Kurds in Rojava have a seat at the negotiating table on the future of Syria. But in the long term, in order to shape our governments, we also have to build broader support for the Kurdish cause. And this is difficult because the natural ally of the Kurds, the left, has really been in disarray. It's been involved in identity politics and, focusing on all these individual siloed issues instead of seeing all of them as a manifestation of capitalist modernity. It's really one of Mr. Öcalan's great insights that we must see all these issues, racism, the environment, all of them as a manifestation of how domination and hierarchy exist under capitalism, and that we really have to transition to a true democratic paradigm in which everyone has agency and is a political actor and allows all of us participate through democratic assemblies in creating a society that is not based on this nation state.
What is your expectation and message for Öcalan and the Kurdish people as well?
Abdullah Öcalan has really charted a new course for democracy that has value not only for bringing peace to the region, but for all of us who believe that human beings are capable of building a better world. We live in a time when even bourgeois representative democracy, unfortunately, is under terrible assault. Mr. Öcalan's paradigm of democratic confederalism provides a roadmap for building a society that's truly democratic, egalitarian, feminist, ecological, and sustainable. This model, which we've seen put into practice in Rojava and Bakur, shows that it's possible to have religious freedom and women's rights and ecological stewardship of the environment when people meet together in local assemblies and together discuss and debate and decide on the future of their communities. It's a model that the rest of the world desperately needs. So my message to the Kurdish people is we will continue to support you and try to inform those who should be allies of the Kurds how important this work is that you're doing. You are doing something that has not been done successfully ever before, finding a way to self-govern without a state and all the violence and repression that comes from states. This is truly the most important project of the 21st century, and you've done it at great sacrifice while also fighting ISIS for the rest of the world. So the Kurdish people should be deeply proud, and we have to continue to learn from your example and take on the long overdue project of adopting the democratic confederalist model in our own countries.
Dear Debbie Bookchin, thanks for joining us. Thank you for your valuable comments today. Evet sevgili izleyiciler, bir diğer Avrupa gündemi programında Medya Haber ekranlarında yeniden sizlerle olduk. Bugün Amerika'dan gazeteci ve Rojava Komitesi üyesi Debbie Bookchin'i ağırladık. Bir sonraki Avrupa gündemi programında yeniden görüşmek ümidiyle.